So many people ask about what happens when you are driving a vehicle, you get arrested, and the officer thinks that they are under the influence of prescription medications. Can someone be charged, convicted of DUI from prescription medications?
Yes, they absolutely can. And that's why on pill bottles, generally you're going to see it says do not operate heavy machinery or operate a vehicle until you know the effect that that medication has on you. And that's ultimately a strong defense in many of those cases. When you build a tolerance to the medication, you know the effect it's had on you. You've been prescribed that medication for 5, 10, 15 years, have never been in a car accident, have never been pulled over for erratic driving, but all of a sudden you have a tag light out or are speeding and get pulled over for and the officer suspects DUI based on the investigation. Well, can you be convicted of DUI for prescription medications? Yes, but it doesn't mean that you are going to be. And an important factor in there is also the officer's training, specifically in drug recognition. Is that officer a drug recognition expert or an advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement officer? The question then becomes, well, what indicators of impairment does that officer observe? Because every prescription drug, every illegal drug, CNS depressant, CNS stimulant, narcotics, they all have different indicators of impairment that you're supposed to look for. And so if the drug results come back with a narcotic, for example, but the officer says that you're talkative and very, upbeat, that shows that you're likely impaired off a stimulant. So it really comes down to what does the officer observe or claim to observe? And then what medications are in your blood? And is it consistent? Does it prove that you maybe are unsafe to operate that vehicle?
Absolutely, and that's a good point because observations from the officer are going to be the key thing that start this investigation technique. So when we're looking and we're knowing that somebody might be impaired off prescription drugs, what, if any, observations does that officer have in those initial phases of a DUI investigation to get them to the point to where they are going to be alleging that someone is under the influence of prescription medication? And then ultimately, if a blood sample is taken, what, if any, levels of that prescription medication are in that system and showing that, at this level, we would expect someone to exhibit these potential observations. Does that line up with the observations that the officer had? And then moving from there, it becomes about the tolerance buildup,
Yes,
right? Because
absolutely.
like you mentioned, every person potentially could be impacted differently from the same medication. So if we're looking at those levels and at this specific level, one person would act one way, but at another level, another person might act a different way. Well, then that allows us to be able to articulate and potentially litigate the fact that even at that specific level that the state's witness is going to try to allege that you were impaired at, we have the ability to say that you were not.
Absolutely. In any case that we've had with prescription medications, the state may have an expert who claims to be a pharmacologist or a toxicologist, but all they can talk is in generalities. A person may be impaired at this level, may be impaired at this level, but when we look at our client specifically, can they establish that that individual is impaired? They cannot unless they watch the body cam, look through their medical records, their years of medical records to see their tolerance. Did their medication dosage increase or decrease over the years? There are too many factors for them to be able to ever establish a specific individual is impaired off the medication. And then the one thing the state can never get around is when you are prescribed a medication, the state does not say, hand over your driver's license. You cannot drive if you are on this medication. And so, how does the state prove that you are too impaired to operate that vehicle on that prescription medication? It becomes very difficult. They can do it. You can be convicted of a DUI on prescription medications, but it's a lot more difficult than an alcohol DUI case, for example.
Absolutely.